Picture this. It's a cool autumn night in 2017. The air is heavy with that damp, lingering chill that makes even familiar places feel uneasy. The streets are quiet, most of the town already asleep. Inside St. Mary's General Hospital, the fluorescent lights buzz faintly as another grueling night shift comes to an end. At exactly 11:47 p.m., security cameras capture a final glimpse of Emily Harper. She was only 27 years old, a nurse, beloved by her patients and colleagues, with a reputation for staying late to comfort the sick. On the grainy footage, Emily pushes open the heavy staff exit door. She looks exhausted, her posture slightly slumped, but her lips curl into the faintest smile as she pulls her cardigan tighter against the cold. She checks her phone, taps quickly at the screen. That last text was to her roommate. Finally off. Be home soon. But Emily never came home. Her blue Honda Civic was discovered in the hospital parking lot the next morning. Locked. Her purse still inside. The car keys still in the ignition. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. Almost as if she'd meant to leave, but simply never did. And from that moment, it was as if Emily Harper had stepped out of the light and into the shadows, never to return. Her friends would later say she wasn't the type to vanish, not without telling someone. Her family insisted she had no reason to run, no secret life, no hidden depths. She was steady, reliable. So where had she gone? The police scoured the parking lot, shining their flashlights into every corner, searching for any trace. Tire marks, discarded belongings, footprints in the dew-covered grass. But the trail ended abruptly at the edge of the tree line behind the hospital. It was here, just a few yards into the dark woods, that search dogs picked up Emily's scent. They barked, pulled at their leashes, their noses pressed to the ground. The officers followed, hope building in their chests. But suddenly, just as quickly as the trail began, it ended. The dogs stopped. Confused. Circling. The scent had vanished, just as Emily had. And with that, the case began. A promising young nurse walked out of her workplace after a long shift and dissolved into the night. What happened to Emily Harper? And why, 6 years later, would a lone hiker stumble across a piece of her identity, hidden deep in a forest? The first 72 hours of any disappearance are critical. For Emily Harper, those 3 days would test not just the limits of police resources, but the resilience of her family and the unity of her town. By dawn the next morning, word had spread. The hospital staff who'd waved goodbye to Emily only hours earlier couldn't believe it. A nurse, vanishing from a secure parking lot, without a trace? The police cordoned off the area, questioning night shift employees, scanning hours of grainy CCTV. They watched Emily exit the building again and again. They saw her walk across the lot. They saw her reach her car. But then nothing. There was no footage of her leaving, no vehicle pulling up beside her, no shadowy figure lurking nearby. Just blank space, like someone had cut the tape short. Her parents, devastated, drove in from 2 towns over. They stood outside the hospital parking lot, clutching each other, watching officers comb the area with flashlights. Her mother whispered. She was supposed to be home by midnight. She always comes home. Search dogs were brought in, their barks echoing through the silent streets. They followed her trail toward the woods behind the hospital. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. Those woods stretched for miles, dense and unlit, a labyrinth of branches and shadow. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights sweeping across treetops like searching eyes. Volunteers formed human chains, calling her name into the dark. Emily. Emily Harper. But the forest gave nothing back. Meanwhile, detectives canvassed Emily's life. They checked her phone records. The last text was indeed to her roommate. The call logs showed nothing unusual. Her bank accounts remained untouched. There were no signs of planning, no notes left behind, no reason to vanish. And yet she was gone. Rumors soon spread. Some whispered about a stalker, an older patient who'd once sent Emily flowers. Others spoke of the night shift curse, a dark joke about staff who walked out and never came back. The media descended, cameras flashing, reporters circling. Headlines screamed, "Young nurse vanishes without a trace." Hospital parking lot mystery. The pressure on the police grew, but so did the silence. Day after day, Search parties returned empty-handed. Her father stood at every press briefing, his voice breaking as he begged, "Please. If anyone knows anything, anything at all, help us find Emily." But the town of Willow Creek seemed to swallow its secrets whole. After 3 weeks, the search scaled back. After 3 months, tips had dwindled. And as the first year passed, Emily Harper's case slipped quietly into the filing cabinets of cold cases. Yet her family never stopped. They left the porch light on every night. They kept her room exactly as she had left it. For them, the nightmare never ended. When the search turned cold, the whispers began. In the absence of answers, theories filled the silence, and Emily Harper's disappearance became less a tragedy and more a riddle everyone wanted to solve. At first, the theories seemed simple. Some believed Emily had been abducted in the parking lot. After all, the shadows between cars, the blind spots of the hospital cameras, those were perfect hunting grounds. But the lack of evidence troubled investigators. No screams were heard. No struggle was seen. No trace of her clothing, bag, or shoes was ever recovered. It was as if she'd stepped off the earth itself. Her family clung to the idea of a kidnapping. "If she was taken, then she's out there," her father said, "and we can bring her home." Yet others in Willow Creek weren't so sure. Emily had once mentioned to colleagues that a patient, an older man, made her uncomfortable. He'd linger after appointments, always asking for her specifically, always too friendly. When detectives interviewed him, he denied everything. His alibi checked out. Still, many wondered. Had someone else, maybe even another patient, been watching her? Following her routine? Waiting for the moment she left work alone in the dark? Then came the cruelest whispers. That Emily hadn't been taken at all, that she'd left. Some pointed to her long hours and exhaustion. Others speculated about a secret relationship, perhaps someone she was meeting that night. When investigators combed through her phone, they found nothing unusual. But rumors persisted. Was there something Emily was hiding? Her family rejected the idea outright. Emily loved her life. She loved her patients. She loved us. She would never walk away. Still, the question lingered. If not abduction, then what? And then the woods. Search dogs had traced her scent toward the thick forest behind the hospital. The trail stopped abruptly near an old service road, as though she had either been picked up or simply disappeared. The forest itself carried its own stories. Locals spoke of strange noises at night, of figures seen darting between trees, of fires burning deep within where no one lived. Teenagers whispered about rituals, about runaways hiding in cabins, about things that didn't want to be found. But was it folklore, or something darker? Others studied the surveillance tapes more closely. The moment Emily crossed the parking lot, the timestamp flickered. Just for a second, as if the recording had glitched, or been tampered with. Could someone have erased those crucial few seconds? If so, who had access? The hospital staff? Security personnel? Someone who didn't want her last moments to be seen? As months passed, her case became a national headline. Talk shows debated her fate. Armchair detectives dissected every frame of her last known movements. Some swore they saw a shadow following her, just outside the glow of the streetlight. Others claimed the way her head turned suggested she knew someone was there. Forums filled with theories. YouTube channels produced hour-long breakdowns. But none of it brought her back. Her mother, weary from interviews, once said softly, "It feels like Emily is trapped somewhere between the truth and the lies. And we don't know which one to believe." And so, the theories kept circling. Kidnapping. Voluntary disappearance. A crime of passion. A conspiracy. Something supernatural. But with no evidence, no confessions, and no body, all anyone had were questions. And in that vacuum of answers, Emily's story became less about who she was, and more about what had happened to her. 6 years is a long time to live without answers. 6 birthdays. 6 Christmases. 6 years of setting a place at the table, only to stare at the empty chair across from you. For Emily Harper's family, life after her disappearance was not living, it was waiting. Her parents, Martha and John, never moved from Willow Creek. They couldn't. Her childhood bedroom remained untouched. Posters still hung on the walls, her nursing textbooks stacked neatly on her desk, as though she might walk through the door at any moment. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, they lit candles on the front porch. Neighbors would join them. For a few hours, the street glowed with a quiet hope that maybe somehow Emily would see the light and find her way home. But each year ended the same: silence. The years brought calls, dozens of them. Sightings of a woman who looked like Emily in gas stations, in airports, in small towns across the country. Tips that she had been taken into trafficking rings. Even one call from a woman claiming to be Emily, begging for help. Each lead was investigated. Each one fell apart. Detective Merrow, who never fully let go of her case, later admitted, "Every false lead made it worse. You start to wonder if the world is mocking you, if the truth is dangling just out of reach, and you'll never get to it." At first, her case drew headlines. Talk shows, news stations, podcasts, all wanted to know the fate of the young nurse who vanished after her shift. But as time passed, new tragedies filled the cycle. The cameras stopped coming. The reporters stopped calling. The world moved on. But the Harper family couldn't. Willow Creek was never the same. For years, parents forbade their children from walking alone at night. The hospital parking lot, once an ordinary stretch of asphalt, became a place whispered about, a landmark of fear. Strangers drove through town, curious to glimpse the site of the mystery. Some left flowers. Others cruelly took selfies. For locals, it was a wound that wouldn't heal. Emily wasn't just gone. She had become folklore. 6 years is long enough for a life to change completely. Emily's younger brother graduated, married, and had a child of his own. Her friends from nursing school advanced in their careers. Some even moved away. But to her family, Emily was frozen in time, forever 27. Her mother once confessed in an interview, voice trembling, "The hardest part isn't losing her. It's the world asking you to keep living, when every breath feels borrowed without her." And yet, even in silence, something remained. Her father spoke of dreams. In them, Emily stood at the edge of a forest, her white nurse's shoes half covered in mud. She never spoke, but her eyes seemed to plead, "Find me." When he woke, the feeling lingered. Not fear, not closure, but something in between. Her mother too admitted to moments when the phone would ring, and for half a second, she believed it was Emily's voice she'd hear on the other end. 6 years of silence, and yet, she was everywhere. In their dreams, in their empty spaces, in their hearts. And then, on a gray October morning in 2018, silence broke. A pair of hikers, deep within the red pine forest, stumbled across something unusual near a moss-covered oak tree. Something metallic. Something glinting in the dirt. It was small, faded, but unmistakable. Emily Harper's hospital ID badge. For 6 years there had been nothing. And then all at once, the forest whispered her name. For 6 years, the red pine forest had held its silence. But that morning, beneath a canopy of twisted branches and damp moss, it finally spoke. And what it revealed would shake everything investigators thought they knew about Emily Harper's disappearance. The hikers hadn't meant to wander that far. The trail markers had disappeared miles back, and they were debating whether to turn around when one of them noticed something sticking out of the ground, half buried under roots and pine needles. At first, they thought it was just trash, maybe an old dog tag, maybe a piece of metal left by hunters. But when they brushed the dirt away, the name appeared. Emily Harper. Her photograph. Her title, registered nurse. The plastic card was faded, cracked at the edges, but intact. The hikers froze. They knew the name. Everyone in Willow Creek knew the name. And in that instant, the forest was no longer just trees and soil. It was a crime scene. When the badge reached Detective Merrow's desk, he stared at it for a long time. 6 years of nothing. And then this. Why here? Why now? Cadaver dogs were brought into the forest. A grid search was established. Dozens of officers combed through the woods with sticks, shovels, and flashlights. But strangely, nothing else appeared. No bones. No clothing. No traces of blood. Just the badge. It was as if someone had placed it there, deliberately. For investigators, the badge raised more questions than answers. Had Emily ever been in that forest? If so, why wasn't there more evidence? And if not, Who had carried her badge there? Was it dropped by accident? Or was it meant to be found, like a cruel breadcrumb left for the world to follow? News of the discovery spread quickly. For the Harper family, it was both a lifeline and a dagger. Her father clutched the badge when detectives showed it to him, his hands trembling. "She touched this," he whispered. "6 years ago my daughter held this." Her mother, on the other hand, collapsed into tears. It means she was out there, lost, alone, maybe calling for us. And we didn't find her. The town too was shaken. The Red Pine Forest, once a place for hunting and weekend hikes, became something else, a labyrinth of secrets. Parents warned their children never to enter. Hikers avoided the trails. Some swore they heard voices at night when the wind shifted, faint calls that echoed through the trees. A vigil was held once again, this time in the town square. Hundreds gathered with candles, holding photos of Emily. But the atmosphere was different. This wasn't just about hope anymore. It was about dread. Because if her badge had survived out there for 6 years, untouched, what else had the forest kept hidden? Theories roared back to life, fiercer than ever. Some believed she had been taken that night and kept hidden in the woods. The badge, they said, was a sign of where she'd been held. Teenagers whispered again about strange gatherings deep in the trees, about fires glowing at night. What if the badge wasn't lost, but offered? More disturbing still were those who asked, how did the badge leave the hospital parking lot? Could someone at the hospital have been involved all along? And in every theory, one detail remained impossible to ignore. The badge hadn't been destroyed by weather, by animals, or by time. It looked placed, preserved, waiting. For 6 years, the Red Pine Forest kept its secret. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And this one was only beginning to unravel. When investigators returned to Red Pine Forest, they didn't come looking for hope. They came looking for a body. But what they found instead was stranger, and far more unsettling. The badge had reignited the case. For the first time in years, Willow Creek swarmed with law enforcement. Officers marked the forest floor with orange tape, drones scanned the canopy from above, and cadaver dogs wove between the trees. The search was methodical. Every square foot within a 5-mile radius of the badge was combed. But as days passed, detectives grew restless. No remains. No clothing. No blood. Only silence. Then on the 4th day, one of the dogs froze near an old logging road. Its handler called the team over. There, half buried beneath layers of pine needles, was a small scrap of fabric. Faded blue. The kind of cotton used in hospital scrubs. Tests later confirmed it wasn't new. It had been there for years. The fabric fibers matched the style of the uniform Emily had last been seen wearing. And suddenly the theory shifted. She hadn't just vanished from the parking lot. She'd been here, in these woods. Detective Merrow gathered his team in the clearing, pointing to the map pinned against the hood of a police SUV. The badge is here. The fabric here. If we connect these points, he traced a line with his pen, we're looking at a path, a direction. Somebody brought Emily into this forest. And for at least some time, she was alive. The words sent chills through the group. The forest no longer felt like a place of death alone. It felt like a prison. As officers spread farther along that path, they began noticing something else. Symbols carved into the trees. At first, they thought they were random scratches, the kind hunters or hikers might leave. But the more they cataloged, the clearer it became. Triangles, circles, crosses, all carved deep, in repeating patterns. Some freshly cut, others so old the bark had begun to heal around them. The forest wasn't just hiding Emily's past. It was a canvas, and someone had been marking it for years. Reporters later revealed that officers refused to stay in the forest overnight after that discovery. One deputy admitted, off the record, that they heard things in the dark. Voices. A woman crying faintly, somewhere between the trees. Another swore he saw a lantern flicker in the distance, though no one else was out there. Even the dogs grew restless, barking into shadows and refusing to move forward. The Red Pine Forest wasn't just evidence. It was alive with something unexplainable. When news broke about the symbols, speculation spread like wildfire. The carvings, some claimed, were ritualistic. evidence of gatherings hidden deep in the woods. Others suggested the markings were a code, directions only understood by those who had been there before. Perhaps the person who took her left those marks deliberately, leading, or mocking those who searched. But the most chilling idea was one investigators couldn't ignore. What if the marks weren't old? What if someone was still using the forest? Detective Merrill returned to the spot where the badge had been found. Standing there, with the trees looming overhead, he said later that he felt something impossible to put into words, like the forest itself was watching. We weren't chasing a cold case anymore, he admitted. We were chasing someone who wanted us to find these things. Someone who was still out there. For 6 years, the forest kept its silence. But with every badge, every scrap, every symbol, it was beginning to whisper. And if investigators were right, Emily Harper's story wasn't buried at all. It was waiting to be told. For 6 years, Emily Harper's trail was silent. But silence has a way of breaking. And when it finally did, it came through the static. While combing through archived evidence boxes, a young officer named Dana Keller found something overlooked, a stack of cassette tapes. They were routine recordings of police radio chatter from the night Emily disappeared. Most were unremarkable. Calls about traffic stops, noise complaints, and routine dispatch. But one tape, time-stamped 2:47 a.m., less than an hour after Emily was last seen, held something chilling. Halfway through the tape, after a pause in chatter, a burst of static crackled across the line. Then faintly beneath the distortion came a sound. Not words. Not clear. But human. A voice. A woman's voice. Whispering. Investigators replayed it over and over. Some swore they heard the words, "Help me." Others insisted it was just feedback. But the unease was undeniable. The voice, whoever it belonged to, was coming from deep within the red pine forest. A forensic audio specialist was brought in. Using spectral analysis, he broke down the static, isolating the faintest signals. What he found was startling. The transmission wasn't random. It was broadcasting from a handheld radio, on the exact same channel the hospital security used at the time. The kind of radio Emily carried during her night shifts. That meant one terrifying thing. At 2:47 a.m., long after Emily vanished from the hospital parking lot, her radio was still transmitting. And it wasn't in the city. It was out there, in the woods. Detective Merrill and his team brought modern scanners into Red Pine. They didn't expect much. But on their second night, as the forest grew dark, the receivers picked up faint distortions again. Not voices this time. Just a hum. A low, steady frequency, impossible to pin down. It wasn't natural. And it wasn't random. The sound seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, echoing between the trees. When news of the tape leaked, theories spiraled. A distress signal. Some believed Emily had tried to use her radio to call for help after being taken. A staged trick. Others thought her abductor deliberately triggered the broadcast, taunting investigators. Residual energy. The more paranormal corners of the internet claimed it was an imprint. Emily's final moments, replaying through the airwaves like a ghost trapped in static. Whatever the explanation, the forest now had a voice. A retired park ranger came forward, shaken by the publicity. He admitted that in 2003, a year after Emily's disappearance, he'd heard the same thing. A woman's voice, faint, carried through his shortwave radio as he patrolled near Red Pine. He'd brushed it off as interference. But now, hearing the tape, he swore it was the same sound. She was out there, he whispered, eyes wet. All this time she was out there. The discovery left investigators with more questions than answers. If Emily had been alive in those woods, why hadn't she been found? Who was keeping her there? And why, after 6 years, were the signals still echoing in the static? The badge, the fabric, the carvings, the voice. Piece by piece, the forest wasn't just telling a story. It was revealing a pattern. For years, the case of Emily Harper was thought to be cold. But now, investigators were no longer chasing a ghost. They were chasing something alive. Something that wanted to be heard. Every forest keeps its secrets. But Red Pine kept more than anyone imagined. And its tallest secret was hiding in plain sight. Deep inside the forest, beyond the marked trails, stood a crumbling fire watchtower. Built in the 1950s, it hadn't been manned for decades. Rangers rarely mentioned it, hikers barely noticed it. But to investigators, it became the next logical step. If Emily's radio had transmitted from the woods, someone could have used the tower's height to amplify the signal. One autumn evening, Detective Marrow led a team to the site. Flashlights cut through the mist as the structure loomed from the darkness. Its skeletal frame creaked with the wind, every step up the iron staircase moaning like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with dust. But the room told a story. A rusted cot pushed against the wall. Empty cans of food stacked in corners. Burnt down candles melted onto the floor. Someone had lived there. Not decades ago. Recently. Tucked beneath the cot was a notebook, water-damaged but legible. Its pages were filled with erratic handwriting. She doesn't know where she is. She cries when the owls call. They'll never find her if she stays quiet. The entries didn't use names. But investigators knew. It was Emily. Locals had long whispered about a hermit in Red Pine, the man in the watchtower. He was said to wander at night, carrying a lantern, watching hikers from the tree line. Most dismissed him as a folktale, but now the evidence suggested otherwise. Someone had used that tower as a prison, a lookout, and maybe a graveyard. Beneath the journal, officers found something else. A hospital security patch, torn from a uniform. The same kind Emily wore. It wasn't just coincidence. Whoever wrote that journal had taken her. And the worst part? No one knew if he was still out there. The voice in the static. The carvings in the trees. The journal in the tower. One by one, the forest was giving back its secrets. But with every answer came another question. And the biggest remained. Was Emily Harper ever truly gone? Or had she been kept alive, in the dark heart of Red Pine, all these years? For 6 years, Emily Harper's disappearance had been a ghost story whispered through Red Pine. But every ghost leaves footprints. And now, investigators were standing at the edge of the forest, one step away from the truth. Following the watchtower discovery, searchers swept the woods again. This time, cadaver dogs alerted at a small clearing, barely visible behind thick underbrush. There, buried beneath layers of soil and ash, was a fire pit. Not just any fire pit. Its size, its depth, this wasn't for warmth. This was for erasing something. The ground told a grim tale. Fragments of bone, calcined from extreme heat. Charred metal scraps, later identified as remnants of a hospital badge clip. A melted shoe sole, consistent with the sneakers Emily wore that night. Forensic teams sifted every grain of soil. What they found silenced even the loudest doubters. Traces of human remains, female, DNA partially matched to Emily's parents. It wasn't a full body, just fragments. But it was enough. Emily hadn't simply vanished into the woods. She had been held there, hidden like a secret, and when the capture was done, burned in silence. Whispers about the man in the watchtower grew louder. Residents remembered strange encounters, glimpses of a lantern in the distance, rustling near campsites, odd disappearances of food. But no one had ever been arrested. No name, no photograph, not even a concrete suspect. Whoever he was, he had lived among the trees, watching the town, watching Emily, and then disappeared like smoke after her death. The journal from the tower carried one last chilling line on its back page, scrawled in fading ink. The forest keeps what I cannot. Investigators never determined who wrote it. But paired with the fire pit, it was the closest thing to a confession they'd ever have. In the years since, Emily's story has become part of Red Pine's shadow. Hikers leave flowers near the clearing, though many refuse to go there after dark. The forest still hums with unease, as if it remembers. Emily Harper's parents received the fragments in a small urn, the only piece of closure they would ever hold. But justice? That never came. Emily Harper walked out of a hospital one night in 2017, and was never seen again. 6 years later, a badge, a journal, and ashes whispered the truth, but never the whole of it. The man in the watchtower, if he was real, vanished with his secrets. And Red Pine Forest, to this day, remains a place where silence holds screams the world will never hear. The story of Emily Harper is not just about one woman's disappearance. It's about how some mysteries never close. About how a community can live alongside darkness and never see it until it's too late. And most of all, it's about how the forest doesn't just keep secrets. Sometimes it swallows them.